All right, guys, I know that this season, a ton of people are finally getting into fantasy baseball leagues, and I will be the first one to admit, I am a massive fan of Major League Baseball, but at the same time, I'm not nearly as knowledgeable with fantasy baseball as we are with fantasy basketball, fantasy football. Y'all know that fantasy sports is what I eat, breathe, drink. It doesn't matter what you want to say. This is pretty much all I do. So, of course, we are going to be coming on and talking about Major League Baseball and fantasy baseball in general. But more importantly, what I'm going to be doing throughout the course of this season is I'm going to bring on guys that specialize in fantasy baseball to give you the best week-to-week advice, to give you trade advice, draft advice, whatever you are looking for, and to answer your questions along with that. So, my number one piece of advice for you, if you are going to be playing in a fantasy baseball league this season, is to make sure you're going down there and hitting that subscribe button, joining the flock, because I'm going to be bringing you a video every single day with someone that specializes in this, with someone that's going to be able to give you very accurate information. And while I may not be the person that is going to be diving into the weeds, I'm not going to be the person coming out here and telling you the very small details on how you can get edges over your league mates. What I can do is I can come out here, and for everybody who is just now getting into fantasy baseball, I can give you some general strategies, some general pieces of advice that I feel confident in telling you in how you are going to win your league. But anyway, the first thing that we need to talk about in this video is you need to understand your league settings. Now, fantasy baseball is different than fantasy football, where pretty much every single fantasy football league that you play in, you're going to be going through, you have an opponent every single week, and whoever scores the most points wins the matchup, and you go on to the next week with either a win or a loss. But fantasy baseball, completely different. I mean, you can come out and you can be playing in a category format, you could be playing in an overall points format, or you could be playing in a head-to-head format. There are so many different options. I'm going to focus in on the most popular option and my personal favorite, and that is going to be an overall category league, a 5x5 league. And what this is instead of you going out there and getting a total amount of points for your team's performance at the end of the week, you are going to be earning points in each given category: average, runs, RBIs, stolen bases, wins, ERA, strikeouts, saves, and whip. So when you go through and you earn points for each category, say you have a player like Mookie Betts in your lineup, in one given night, he hits a home run, 2 runners on base, he gives you 3 RBI for that night. Then for your total RBI number, you're going to get 3 added on top of that. And at the end of every single week, you are going to be stacked up compared to every other team in your league. And then you are going to be assigned a place. So maybe you did a very poor job of loading runs into your starting lineup throughout the course of the week, but you did a fantastic job getting stolen bases, and you have the most stolen bases in your entire league. You are then going to get 12 points for having the most stolen bases, and this is assuming that you're playing in a 12-man league where maybe you have the least amount of runs. In that case, you're only going to get 1 point. And obviously, if you're in the middle, you're going to get 6. Everybody here can do math. You just go up and down that ladder, and then you are going to be doing that for every single statistical category. So it definitely makes a massive need for you to go out there and make sure that you have a nice balance throughout your entire team. You can't really only load up on starting pitching, and you can't really only load up on hitters that you think are going to give you power. Because if you're not going through and getting that balance throughout your lineup, it doesn't matter if you're coming away at the end of the week with the team with the most RBIs and the highest average. If you're not getting stolen bases, if you are not getting wins, if you are not getting a nice amount of strikeouts from your pitchers, then you are going to be behind the 8 ball, and you're really going to have no shot at the title for your fantasy basketball league. And when we go through and when we are drafting for balance, there are a couple easy rules that we can look at for both hitters and pitchers when we do so. So with hitters, if we're drafting for balance, we want to make sure that they are going to be getting on base. You need to make sure that they have a chance to get on base, because if they're not on base, they're not going to be able to provide you a high average. They're not going to be able to provide you stolen bases. They're not going to be able to provide you, most importantly, those runs that we are always chasing. So when you're looking for hitters to get on base, you want guys that are getting on base about, just say, 35% of the time. It definitely not below 300, because if you're below 300, say you're getting on base 29, 28% of the time, that's going to be a very hard spot for you to go out there and score from, regardless of the spot that you were getting on. Just because if you're not seeing the volume in that, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. Like I said earlier, that's something that we really want to prioritize. And when we're also prioritizing our hitters to go out there and hit with power, when we want them to be racking up those RBIs, it's important that you go out there and you look for a very high slugging percentage. And right now, when you're looking for hitters, if you can get a hitter with a slugging percentage of 45%, up there at least over 400, that's going to put you in a very nice spot, especially if they're also coming through with a high on-base percentage, and you are going to get that nice balance throughout your lineup where you know you're going to be getting the high average, you're going to be getting the RBIs, you're going to be getting the runs. Obviously, stolen bases are a little bit different, but if you are getting hitters that hit for contact and hit for power at the same time, you're going to be covering pretty much every single base that you need to. So if you go by those two rules, I think that's a general decent spot to be when you are drafting the hitters on your roster. Whereas pitchers, on the other hand, they're going to be a little bit harder to evaluate. There are a couple things that we want to see. Obviously, we need to see pitchers racking up strikeouts, as that's going to directly contribute to a single category and have some different effects on other categories such as ERA. And if we are setting a benchmark for where your pitchers want to be, if you can get 6 strikeouts per 9 innings, that's completely fine. Obviously, we would prefer more than that, but 6 Ks per 9 is fine in my book. And you want 2 strikeouts for every walk that your pitcher is going to see. Just the pitchers that are going to be racking up those strikeouts, honestly, regardless of if it's a category league or a point league, they're going to be in a very nice spot to help you out at the end of the week. And lastly, of course, with our pitchers, we do not want them to be giving up a ton of power. We do not want them to be giving up a home run every 7 or 8 innings or so. We need to see about 1 home run every 9 innings, or preferably less, but very similar to the hitters. Here, you want to be making sure that your pitchers are going to be balanced across the board, and you're not going to be just completely punting any given category, because if you're doing so, I mean, it's hard unless you are literally elite everywhere else. Okay, so now let's go through some other strategy pieces that are just small pieces of advice that I can give you if you're just now getting into fantasy baseball. My first piece of advice is don't worry about the positions early on in your fantasy draft. Just be drafting the players that you feel most confident that will come through with the statistics. And then later on in your draft, that's when you can pivot over. That's when you can go, okay, let's look for some guys that are going to be able to fill in the holes in my roster. But if you are already planning on filling holes at the very beginning, it's just not something that we are wanting to do, as you are going to be losing out on home runs. You're going to be losing out on some RBIs. And here, I want to make sure we are balanced at the beginning and going with best player available. And also, if we're looking at projections, what you have to understand is you have to understand that pitchers are always going to have a higher injury rate than hitters. This is just the nature of the position. It's just the nature of how many innings these guys are getting in. So if you are drafting a pitcher at the very beginning of your draft, while they may have a higher upside to help contribute to your starting lineup and help you get at the top of those categories, what you are also risking is you're risking that one of your early round picks is going to go out with an injury. And this rolls into our next piece of advice, and that is do not be drafting players that are already dealing with a nagging injury, because once you get that pitcher with a nagging injury, not only do you have to worry about how long they are going to be out, not only do you have to worry about that pitcher getting re-injured, but you need to deal with the fact that they are not going to be thrust right back in to the starting lineup and seeing as many pitches per night that they were before their injury. They're going to be worked back slowly, which is obviously not ideal for our fantasy baseball rosters. And now my last piece of advice is going to be going back to those hitters. And my piece of advice is to target the teams that project to have a decent amount of runs. The teams that we know that if there are hitters around the guy you are looking to be drafting that are going to hit with power, that are going to go out there and kind of provide you a decent amount of overall runs, that's going to contribute to a much better shot of your player that you drafted actually getting home, actually being able to advance. So yeah, that's my last piece of advice. Go out there and try to get the guys on the Dodgers, get the guys on the White Sox, guys that are in good lineups, because it's going to help in the long run. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.